All righty. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you all so much for joining the Help Network in today's The Sound Design panel. Please join me in welcoming in Colin Andrew Grant, Gordon Durity, and Braden Parkes. Insert fake applause. Welcome in, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's going to be a very awesome experience because we get to speak with these amazing sound designers who have had so many years of experience in the industry. And of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to go ahead and send them to the Q&A section on Zoom, and I'll go ahead and keep tabs on them. But we also have some other questions that we're so excited to ask our panelists here. So without any further ado, if you guys want to go ahead one by one and introduce yourselves, what you do, and a little check-in question, what sound design is to you? Starting with Colin.
Sure. Hi, I'm Colin. Kind of do a little bit of everything in game audio, but I've worked as an associate sound designer, music editor, and a dialogue coordinator for companies such as PlayStation and 343 Industries. And what sound design means to me, I guess it's the ability to combine the technical and concrete needs of projects as well as the creative.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Next up, we have Gordon.
Hi, I'm Gordon Durity, Executive Audio Director at Electronic Arts. So what I do there is a whole bunch of stuff. I supervise creative, technical, strategy for a large part of the portfolio. So that's all the sports, most of the driving, Star Wars, Dead Space, a whole bunch. I've been there almost 24 years. So I think I'm the old guy on the call right now. So I've been doing sound design, interactive as well as linear for quite a long time, doing a lot of film post and film composition. So for me, sound is I always tell people it's the fourth dimension. So you've got picture, but picture is still very planar. Even if you're in VR, it's still, you can only see this far in front of you, but sound is all around. I call it omnispheric. So you can create a lot of emotion, a lot of the unseen world with sound, which is really fascinating. And if you've ever been on a film mix and when you have to change the feel of a scene or create an emotion, sound design really pulls it together there.
Thank you so much. I love that description. That was awesome. And last but not least, we have Braden.
Hey guys, my name is Braden. I've been working in sound design for about 8 or 9 years now. I started under Charles Deenan, kind of as his right-hand man for about six or 7 years. And then I recently left and I work now with Adam Boyd at his company and supervising a AAA game right now, all the sound design and implementation for the most part. It's unannounced, so I can't really talk too much about it, but loving it, and game audio is awesome. And sound design to me is, I don't know, I think it's an art form and it's a craft, and it's whatever you want to make it. If you want to focus on technical stuff or just telling stories with, the actual sound effects and transitions and vibe, that's all fine too. Just as long as you're, helping make better entertainment for everyone. It's what it's all about. So.
Awesome. And so obviously, all three of you guys work in games. Are there any other mediums that you guys do sound design for, or is it mostly just games these days?
I still do. I do film post, as well as sound design, specifically synth design work as well for music production. But games is primarily the main thing. But yeah, a lot of post-production as well.
Do you think what are like the different challenges between working on games and post-production for film and whatnot?
I'll go again. Well, I always say that, film is linear. And so you have to have all of those great skills, being able to put sound and picture together in an emotional, impactful way. So that, how hard it is to do great film post in general. with games, you've not only got to have that under control, you also have the thrill of being interactive software, and creating software is full of all of the things you need to do, all the engineering side of things, the bugs, the unpredictability of the gamer. So it's an added layer on top, complexity on top of just linear post-production. And at the end of the day, the player has to feel as though it's a complete, well thought out, well produced throughput of entertainment, like Braden says.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. In general, with all three of you, did you have any specific like training or education? Like where would be a good first place to start off for anyone that's interested in getting into this field?
I actually want to take this one. I have a bit of a passion about this. I don't think there's any right path for everyone. We're all built differently and kind of need to learn in different ways for the most part. But I definitely think that it's possible to get into this field without traditional college if you don't have the means to do that, because it's such a creative kind of learn on the job kind of thing anyway. I think it's hard. I've seen a lot of people come out of school and still have a lot of gaps that need filling. And so just know that if you're in a position where you don't have a good school near you, a good university, or you don't have the money for it, there's definitely still a lot of hope that you can do this. I didn't do a day of college, and I've been able to make a nice life for myself with this career and had a lot of fun. And there's luck involved, as there is with everything. But if you put yourself in the right positions to receive that luck, it may strike you. And I actually have a YouTube channel and a Discord where I try to help people with feedback and learn the craft kind of on their own in their bedroom. And school is good for some, but that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
You go ahead and feel free to plug in your YouTube channel and your Discord if you want as well.
Oh, sure. If you just look up Braden Parkes sound on YouTube, you'll find it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. Colin, did you want to share a little bit about your background or how you got into sound design as well?
Yeah, so I did go the School of Art, originally studying music composition, and then kind of joining film clubs and kind of finding my way to sound design. So that's kind of how I got my start. And I mean, everything Ben said is definitely on the money, though. School is definitely not the only way to go.
For sure, for sure. Do you guys have any sort of like resources or anything that you guys used or that you guys can share with everyone here? Whether it's a YouTube channel or anything that you think would be helpful to anyone.
Yeah, I guess one thing is that even after I went to school, I did find I had a lot of gaps, and I still do have a lot of gaps. But one thing I did end up doing is it's still school, but in kind of less traditional sense that the School of Video Game Audio is an online course that you can kind of take. That's kind of a lot easier to do when you're also living your life and working and doing stuff like that. And I had a lot of gaps with my the interactive aspect, the technical. So I kind of supplemented my education with that, and taking a very intensive course like that helped me while I was still working full time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And obviously with the Health Network, a lot of our audiences and students and whatnot are voice actors or people that are interested in the game industry. Do you guys as sound designers get to work with voice actors? And if you do, is there anything you wish that fellow actors could know beforehand before coming into like a session or any sort of project or any sort of way that you guys interact? And if you guys don't, like, that's totally fine too. Like, this is kind of a learning experience for all of us.
I can jump in on this. Yeah, in the past, I've done cartoon voice recording. I'm based out of Vancouver, so back in the day, there was a ton of cartoon voice stuff, and that's a good way to learn. What happens is, you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 people in a room. Voice actors are very interesting people. They never seem to turn off their voice, and they do multiple characters. But you have to be on it. You have to know how to check cues. You have to work with producers. you've got to listen to flow, but more importantly, it's, not that you are a producer, whether you're engineering or producing, you have to make sure the talent is in the zone and relaxed, because you're only a couple of takes away from a disaster. If things start going off the rails, you got to bring it in. So one of the key things that I wish more people would do is read the script. As an engineer or producer of a voice over, read the script. You must understand where things are, mark the scripts out, mark out your takes, have, dropping markers in Pro Tools or whatever you're using. Just make it super easy and have a flow so you can easily know where you need to be, what you need to redo, and keep the session flowing with the talent.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Let's see. I'm just looking at like my little bag questions. Oh, are there any other teams that you guys work with when you're working on projects? Like, are you guys specifically just one isolated team, or are you also working with any like other development teams and whatnot, or anything of that sort?
Yeah, I think I can take this. Because I've been on both sides of it. Because before I was doing dialogue coordinating with PlayStation, I was working as a dialogue editor with Formosa Interactive. And so I found pretty much in every project I've worked with is, there's so much work to do, especially with dialogue, but also with sound design as well, is that there will be a certain amount of outsourcing and working with other teams that has to be done. So I've been on kind of both sides of being on the outsource side, as well as, with my coordination role, checking the work of people doing the outsourcing and, kind of making sure it works to our standards.
Anyone else have any other stories they want to share about this?
I'm sorry, what was the question? It was about working with other teams?
Yeah. Are you mostly just isolated in like the sound department, or do you also like interacting with like other parts of the development teams?
Yeah, there's definitely on the project I'm in, it's a very small group, development group. And so it's a very flat company as well. So we input on game design and combat and other things like that. And it feels very free flowing and nice. And obviously there are people who are more specialized at those things that kind of get final say. But yeah, no, there's lots of situations you can enter in. I've been in things where in trailers before we've done sound before the picture was done, and it actually helped the editors and VFX artists finish out the trailer that way. So yeah, don't feel obligated to be confined to your end of the line box there, especially if you're on a more creative, open-ended project. You can influence the visuals as well or other things. So.
Let's see. Ooh. Do you guys have any like personal favorites of your projects? Are you guys all gamers as well? Or are you guys mostly just working in the behind the scenes? Everyone's welcome to answer this one.
Yeah. Favorite project. As I said, I've been doing this for 30 years plus. So done lots of films, worked with lots of great people. As far as on the game side of things, favorite, I think one of my favorite projects was probably, I did about 3.5 years with EA and Def Jam doing PlayStation 2, Def Jam, Fight for New York and Vendetta. But they were amazing projects. I got to, I got to have access to all the old 2-inch tapes of, Public Enemy and early Snoop Dogg and a whole bunch of stuff. So I saw how all those tracks were put together. Plus I was able to work with some amazing folks in LA at Dane Tracks and Warner Brothers and other places. So that was a really great project. I think one of the other fun projects I did was SSX Tricky, because we had no idea what we were trying to do. So working with Run DMC and Mixmaster Mike, and then all of the other crazy sounds that went into that game, that was kind of a breakthrough game as far as just like full on, what can the PS2 do? So that was an all-time favorite as well.
Oh my gosh, I love SSX Tricky. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Colin, Braden, any projects you guys really loved working on?
Yeah. When I was at PlayStation, I worked originally as a dialogue coordinator, then as an associate sound designer on this little project called Concrete Genie. And I really like working on it because, you end up working on a lot of, in games, a lot of, very violent games. It's just, kind of the way that it goes. And this was less about that and kind of more about, this kid, his art, and his town. And so I love the chances when I get to work on, other kind of games like that. So that was fun.
Especially these days, like games as a medium is just growing, and there's so many different kinds of stories that can be told. Braden, any projects that you want to talk about that you love working on?
Yeah, I mean, every project's different. I think when this one that I'm currently on is done, that's going to be a really big favorite of mine, just because of the amount of ownership and kind of involvement I've had. We're always a part of a team, and in the past, I did a lot of trailers and cinematic projects, which are all really fun. We working with amazing mocap artists as well on the Call of Duties and the Halo anniversary projects we did, and this is all over at Source with Charles. And now I'm at Rebound Sound with Adam, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff. And I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say about what we're working on, so I'm going to be a little vague there. But yeah, I mean, every project is fun in its own way. Some are better than others, but you can find that out as you go through your career and see who you like working with.
It's so true. If there's anything you could tell your younger self when you first started getting into sound design and in this industry, what would you want to tell yourself? Any piece of advice? Any just like, it's gonna be okay? Anything like that?
I could jump in. Well, so I would say the positive thing is, once again, like, I think similar to this to the rest of the guys here, I didn't go to any specific school to learn this. One of the things is I just, I studied it as much as I could. I just got into it. I mean, I started cutting sound on a Steenbeck on 16 mil mag. So that was really early. I was fortunate enough to do workshops with Walter Murch and some other giants in the industry, but it's just to keep plowing through, and those long nights and scary moments that dissuade you. If you have a true passion for it, just find the opportunities and sort of stick in it. I think that's probably the best thing. And then if you think you can, and it's just a matter of filling in the blanks to get there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have a little fun one here. If you guys all want to answer this one, if you guys weren't currently working where you were or where you are right now, where do you see yourself being in? Would you still be in the games industry? Would you be doing something completely different? Yeah, everyone's feel free to answer this one.
Yeah, sure. I almost went to school for anthropology, and the last second I switched to music. So, if I didn't end up going down this route, I would probably, hopefully be an associate professor somewhere, just studying that stuff, because I had a real passion for that.
Awesome. Anyone else have any other directions in life they could have taken if they didn't end up where they are today?
Yeah. My dad was a brain surgeon. My mom was a GP. So that was a destined path for me. And I was quite good at medicine and biology and that stuff, but I didn't have the passion. So, going into this path through music and recording production, and then I was always into art and science. So computers from an early age, and as well as sound really engaged me from a music and just atmospheric point of view. So that would most than likely have been my path. And I was really into neuroscience more than surgical part of it. So it probably would have been something doing brain research.
Oh my goodness, that is a completely different direction than where you ended up. Braden, do you have a different direction you would have ended up in?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried a whole lot of things in my times. There's anything that involves creativity and technology, I think, is appealing to me. So, everything from filmmaking, graphic design, all the way to marketing, I could have seen myself doing, and I've tried. I've tried starting numerous businesses on the side. Not a lot of people know that, but I've done a lot of online businesses. Some were more successful than others. After the pandemic happened, I kind of stopped with all that. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of other things I was interested in, and it feels like there's not enough time in the day. So.
Well, I'm really grateful that you guys are all here making, awesome pieces of media that we all enjoy. That is actually all the basic questions that we have on our end, but we are getting some questions from our audience. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to send them to the Q&A section, and I'll go ahead and read them off. And everyone in our panelists are welcome to answer these if they think they can. The first question we have is from Lawrence, and they ask, what are some of the changes you've seen in using practical versus processed effects over time? What are some of the more unique standards you've to design for in audio? If anyone wants to take a crack at that one.
I'll jump in. Let me just open up the key. So it's two parts there, right? What are some of the changes in using practical versus processed effects?
Mm-hmm.
So practical effects meaning I'm thinking built effects. Is that what I'm interpreting practical to mean?
I believe so, yeah.
It's a combination of the two. Once again, when I was coming up, there were not like the abundance of libraries and so many sources. You pretty much had to go in and record your own. So that being part of the aesthetic of making anything unique, there's still, I don't care what libraries you use, you can always hear a library, and there's something about adding live sound, if not from the ground up, but a layer on top. So I always encourage when I've taught sound design or within my teams that, libraries are a great source, but they are a source, and you got to manipulate them, you got to process them, but adding a layer of something you've recorded live on top just raises everything to another level.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much. The next question we have is from Jordan. They ask, because there are so many remote sessions, do you have any advice for voice actors making their own home studios, sound design friendly to make your guys' jobs easier?
Sure, yeah. I can probably speak to a little bit dialogue side of things. Of course, there's a lot of money you can throw at a home studio, and how practical that can be depends on what you have. But I think a lot of the stuff that you can definitely do that doesn't cost money, on the same thing you can do when you go into a studio, is being aware of your position from your mic, being aware of what you're wearing, which would make it, as an editor, if you're wearing a lot of clangly jewelry, typical stuff that you would expect when you walk into a studio, do that from home as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering that.
One thing to add to that as well, because this is the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2.5 years ago, the thought of recording entire VO sessions from end to end for high-end projects didn't really exist. People would fly in. So one of the critical things, if you're going to be a remote VO person, is apart from getting decent mic, quiet room, maybe one of those reflection filters, it doesn't take a lot. A good IO is a good solid internet connection, because that is critical. Just invest in the best internet connection you can have, because that literally is the lifeline to keeping the data flowing and the session moving along.
Have there been like experiences of like really bad like internet outages as you've been working during the pandemic and whatnot?
A few times, yes. We've had to switch that. Luckily, we have our own backbone, so we have pretty fast pipes. But on the talent side of things, yeah, we've had to sort of reschedule something because of an internet dropout.
Oh my goodness. That's a very important piece of advice. Thank you for chiming in on that. The next question we have is from Rachel, and they ask, how has the industry been in their treatment towards people of color sound designers? Feel free if you guys want to answer this one, go ahead.
I'll jump in on that one as well. Well, how has the industry been? It's getting better. It still is a rare thing. There's people of color, and then there's also underrepresented all the way around, like women as well. Other folks, but it's gotten better because there's a conscious effort to encourage people of color and underrepresented folks to get into sound design. It is one of those things that's still very male focused, and I've reached out to schools to say, hey, one of the schools that's one of our feeder schools is Vancouver Film School, and we've done lots of integration, lots of tours from there, and I'll go in and I'll see, I said, who are your top students? And I'll go in and they'll say, well, here's a list of tops. And there'll be, X number of women there. So great. We bring them in, I'd do a tour of EA, sort of explain how it all goes. And then I'd say, do you guys track down the road to see where your alumni end up? And a lot of the time, the women from the group, even though they were really good sound designers, end up going into like management, librarian, something else along that nature, versus sort of progressing through the real career of sound design, the pure career of sound design. So that's something that we are trying to encourage, and I have seen it turn around, but it takes effort. So overall, the industry's gotten better. I guess I've been in it a long time, so there's been some embarrassing and some W2F moments, but it is getting better. It's not there yet, but it is getting better.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely a conversation that should still be going on these days. So it's really awesome to hear that sort of insight. The next question we have is from Abdul, and they ask, what is the hardest part before your professional career breakthrough? How long are you stuck in starting out, and how do you get out of it and make it as your main income or source of living?
I mean, for me, I think the hardest part as you're just starting out is you don't know what you don't know, and it can be really hard to understand what people are looking for in hiring sound designers or sound effects editors or even VO artists. So all you can really do is kind of try to hone your craft. And the things that I like to try to teach people to do who are just starting out is practice recreating your favorite sounds from your favorite movies or games or TV shows. Really try to hone your craft and develop your ear at the same time, because most of this craft is just learning the tools and then teaching your ear to identify kind of how things should sound and be able to have that forward hearing about what you're working on, and then just tweaking the knobs until it gets there. So I think people can underestimate the time it takes to do that. It's a lot easier to learn in person with a mentor, but because that's a lot harder now and everything's becoming so much more global, trying to help people practice recreations and then eventually redesigns of scenes and game things. And that's a lot of what my Discord is people doing that and getting feedback in that way. But yeah, getting a breakthrough is the whole goal, right? And we're here to kind of pull back the curtain as much as possible. But at the end of the day, there's a big demand and need for sound designers today. Quality people that have put in the years that you can rely on to have a good output, and so getting yourself there to a point where you can constantly lay down things that sound amazing and that people really respond to is kind of all it's about. And going back to the people of color question, I mean, I'm obviously not one that should speak too much on it, but I can say that in these communities and in my community specifically, we don't care where you're from or what you look like or what you identify as or anything like that. It's just about the work that you do and the sounds that you create and the stories you tell with that sound. So all that exists is the work, and doesn't matter who or what you are, you just focus and do good work, and that's valued in this industry. So hopefully that helps inspire someone that might be having doubts about that kind of stuff. If you're good, people will notice. So
For sure. Yeah, actually, touching on that topic, you mentioned having a mentor. Is there any sort of like route that you like, did you find them just through like online, or how does one go about finding a mentor in sound design specifically?
I mean, I'm a bit privileged in that I live in LA, and so it was easier. You know, I was working at the grocery store. I was about 18, 19. I was interning at music studios. I worked on a couple films, and I realized game sound would probably fit me well because I've always been a big gamer. And so I literally Google mapped post sound and found a bunch of companies, emailed dozens of them. I found Charles Dienan's company, Source Sound, and emailed him for about 7 to 8 months straight, and finally got in there. And you know, it was very lucky, and you know, it was a good 6, 7 years there, very hard work, very stressful, but I learned a ton, and that really set my whole career up because I kind of got that standard of quality from him and the amazing men and women that we worked with over there. So, but again, there's things you can do just in your own bedroom to flex that muscle. It's like the difference between going to a gym and doing push-ups in your room. You know, you'll still get there. It'll take some time, but it's possible. So anyway, and that's what, again, I'm not trying to overly plug my Discord and stuff, but that's what we try to do there, is help people and kind of facilitate that process where you might not be in a position to go to a big city and find a studio and work there. So.
For sure. I mean, it's an available resource. Hopping off that, Colin, Gordon, if you guys want to answer, is there any advice you could give to beginning sound designers trying to find their way and pave their way in this industry?
Yeah, so I'll jump. Yeah, similar. I think, you know, Braden's path is quite good. So the advice is practice, practice, practice. It's fortunate that there is so much material to practice with. YouTube, it is, you know, there are tons and tons of video sources to grab content, picture content from. There's lots of great online courses. You mentioned School of Video Game Audio. That's a great spot as well with Leonard. You know, I worked a lot with Charles and Adam. They're both awesome guys. So good on you, Braden. The School of Charles Dienan is not an easy school, I know. I've seen others go through it, and, you know, so finding an opportunity, being persistent. It is competitive, but you know, you can get there. But I would say it's trying to work and associate with the best people you can. I'd say that's one of the critical things, is mentoring, observing, being mentored, being like observing really great people. That definitely gives you a leg up versus just kind of being on the fringe sort of thing.
For sure. It's also really funny to see the connection that you guys have with you know, people in the industry. It makes it feel really small. Colin, do you have any advice you can give?
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar vein of Gordon. You know, I find myself, I tend to be a fairly introverted person, which can be a little bit difficult, you know, in an industry with so many people trying to get in. And, you know, now there's that added pressure of a lot of people be like, well, we also need to have like a social media presence and all that stuff. And so, you know, that's, you know, that it's kind of a lot. But I definitely think, you know, not being afraid to put yourself out there, and not discounting yourself out before, you know, others, you know, can do it for you, because, you know, that pressure can be a lot. So, you know, apply for that job, even if you're in your head, you're like, oh, I don't think I can get that. Because, you know, you don't want to be that first line of defense stopping you from getting a position or getting something. So you kind of have to push past that and, you know, like keep on applying, keep on doing things. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you. We have another question from Lawrence, and I'm gonna add a little twist on it just to make it a little bit more interesting. But they ask, on resumes for sound designers, what do they generally look for in hiring? I want to add to that. What are some skills that people may not even know that could be useful in sound design?
I could one skill I found has been very helpful is knowing Excel. I found that's with all my jobs, that's been, the one thing that's been the through line, which you wouldn't think, but I found that thing, Excel, knowing how to, proper documentation, that kind of skill set is incredibly important because you're working with, thousands upon thousands of assets and all these different peoples. And, I'd much rather work with someone who's incredibly organized and is still working on things than someone who is incredibly talented but doesn't comment in their code. Personally,
Yeah, that's literally what I wanted to hear, something like that, because no one would expect Excel to be a skill to be like something that's useful in like sound, but that's really important. Thank you for sharing that. We have a question from Mike, and they ask, how long does it take for you to build a scene in a modern video game? Are you working on a scene alone, or are you working with a team where each person handles their own special piece of it?
I mean, I can take a little bit of this. I think it really varies where you're working. Games nowadays are made by one person to tens of thousands of people. I mean, it really depends on, what's going on. And so in a modern video game, I assume you're talking about like a AAA title, narrative story game with a kind of a scene. I can't really speak to that. Gordon would probably be better. But in my experience, it can be done by one person. It just, scaling that into a long game is very difficult. So often there are different people of different experience levels. And I also want to point out that game companies outsource a lot as well, and they don't like to talk about it as much, but I think that's a good place for people who are looking to break in to start potentially. Because if you work for a third-party company, they're usually smaller, and you might get a bit more variety. You might be able to do commercials and in-game stuff or whatever. It depends where you're working and what kind of work they do, but you'll also get a bit more individual attention, perhaps. Every team is different. I'm not trying to group, corporate AAA games into one bag, but when there's just a team of 6 people working at a third-party company and they're getting these extra assets to work on and stuff, usually there's someone there. Like at my company, we have Adam, and then I also try to help as well, teach our newer employees to kind of give them this individualized attention. It's kind of a nice perk of working at a company like that. But yeah.
Yeah. So for Colin and Gordon, do you guys also want to chime in on this question as well?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. Well, all of the projects I've worked on over the years have been large AAA games. So, games have grown exponentially in size and complexity in the AAA space, particularly. We used to do FIFA with a smaller crew back in the day on the old PS1, PS2. Now we've got teams all over. It's a large size, so absolutely we have specialties. There's VO people that are specialized, particularly in a sports game where you've got real-time interactive dialogue. There'll be 2 or 3 people working on that. You've got mixing, you've got technical audio artists that are building structures inside of the engine. You've got creative sound designers. I mean, everybody's working in the engine, but how long does it take to build a scene? It's hard to say because once again, it's scalable, but you do have multiple disciplines working on it and meeting different milestones along the way. So for Star Wars Squadrons, which was a great title, we did a lot of work. We also outsourced a lot. That was done in Montreal with my team in Montreal. But absolutely, specialities, VO, cut scenes, spaceship sound effects, artillery, that sort of stuff. And it's all integrated with the audio director.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insight about that as well. We have another question from Ivo, and they ask, if you don't have any previous experience in sound design, what apart from your reel or other pieces of samples that you have would go onto your CV, which would be looked at when companies are hiring? And is knowing implementation a must, or is that something that you can go in without knowing and learn on the job? So I guess for the first part, just is there anything you should prepare other than your reel and samples?
Well, yeah, I would say, so if you're focusing on game audio, it is game audio. It's not film audio, it's not television audio. They are related cousins, but game audio has that other complexity of interactivity. So absolutely, there are common engines out there. There's Wise and Fmod. I suggest Wise more than Fmod because there's more people working in Wise and on larger games than Fmod. Fmod's a good engine as well, but download Wise, do a demo. I've asked people numerous times, please, 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 please show me something that great. You show me your interactive reel, your linear reel. So first of all, can you put sound to picture in an interesting, creative, unique way? Great, check mark. Now, can you show that you can deal with concepts of interactivity? That's definitely a huge plus. So download Wise, take the course at the School of Video Game, whatever you can, practice, and just have on your reel either a video capture of you demonstrating something in Wise or a real-time project that people can download and just fire it up, because that will help you establish that you can actually implement in the engine or in a game engine of some kind.
And I would add on to that, if you have zero interest in working with implementation or middleware or anything like that, either check out other types of media, or you can work for a third-party company that will less often be implementing into the game just because of the friction of having to send a build to them and all that, the security issues. A lot of the time, even if you're doing in-game sounds, they'll send captures of the game in video form, and you just queue up the first frame of the animation and you make a sound and you send it to them and they implement it. So there are options if you're just completely opposed and you just are super creative and don't want to deal with any of that left brain stuff. But game audio is definitely, as Gordon was saying, very centered around the interactivity and understanding kind of that flow back and forth between the player and the game. So
Colin, is there anything you want to add into this question?
Yeah, sure. I guess on top of, like what Gordon said, because, if you don't have the money, to pay for a course, you can take the Wise courses that they have, you just don't do the certificate at the end. And that's the way you do it. Game jams are kind of another way to get experience working on a game. Like I did Global Game Jam, and that was a great experience to kind of work with people from other disciplines, get my sounds into a game, and the other game jams besides that, as well as kind of reaching out to other people in other disciplines who are kind of at the same level as you is a great way to kind of get that experience. If you find it's difficult to get into, the top company you're trying to get into, reach out to an indie developer who is at the kind of same steps as you and work with them. As kind of a way to build up that reel and that CV and ensure that you have that interactive experience.
Awesome. Yeah, especially with a lot of indie developers and teams, starting out nowadays, it's a lot more accessible and easy to find people to work with. So that's really awesome advice.
Yeah, so one more thing I'll add to that is, and this is Braden actually kind of tweaked something. Yeah, apart from, if you don't want to be, full integrated implementation, that's fine. But you also you need to know how game assets work. So it's not one big sound. Like here is a jalopy charity thingy doing whatever it is. Even in film post, you don't really make one monolithic sound. You break it up into elements, but you do that more in game audio. So being able to break down, like look at an asset, whether it's a rail gun or whatever you happen to be doing, just know that the more you can break it down into defined elements and provide that back to the implementation folks, the better it is, because the engine is going to want to be modulating it and adding layers and pulling layers out and doing different things, pitching something out and keeping some, whatever it is. You want to be able to break that asset up instead of one big monolithic sound. That's just a single sample. You can't do anything with that in real time. You play it and it's done. But if you really want to have something that's alive and moving and dynamic, you've got to break those elements down. And that's a skill as a sound designer you need to know, is how do you layer your sounds and break the elements up so that when you put them back together in real time in the game engine, they all coordinate and make sense.
For sure. Thank you so much for chiming in with that. We have another question. It is, what are some of the challenges with working with sound design when things are based on player input? That's very unique to games. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what Gordon was just saying, just on steroids there. I mean, you need to understand, you know, if you're a chef and you're cooking this meal, and you need to get the right ingredients laid out, split up the right way, portioned out, and then let the game engine kind of do what it needs to do. Challenges, I mean, a lot of this stuff is very iterative. You know, it's very trial and error, and don't beat yourself up if you don't have the right answer at the first time. But I mean, yeah, most games take a lot of player input, and there's a lot of dynamic mixing happening. A lot of things that people wouldn't expect, that game engines are ducking or changing. So it's I don't know, but I still hold to the fact that I think, especially if you're more technical minded, and we all need to kind of know these things about ourselves, but if you're more technical minded, I wouldn't stress too much about it. That stuff I think is more easily learned and taught, because it is a bit more structured, and there is kind of more of a right and wrong way to go about things, more so than, you know, the ambiguity of sound design on its own. So I would first worry about getting your ear trained up and your chops in that sense of being able to understand why a sound isn't working, and then tweaking it until it does work. And then once you do that, you can learn all these things about how to divvy up assets, how to implement, how to work with whatever game engine you're working on. People, I think, are much more eager to teach that than, you know, they'll work with someone who can make really cool sound design but doesn't know as much about that, versus the opposite, where they're really great at implementing but their ear is, you know, a bit too green. So that's just my 2 cents with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, bouncing off that, what are some other common issues you guys experience that are unique to working on games? Like, it could be based on player input, it could be based on layering. Like, what are some other things that you might encounter? Colin and Gordon, if you guys want to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the human ear is really adept at finding patterns and repetition. So, you know, I don't care what generation of game system, it seems that we still seldom get real-time Foley correct. There's the 2 things that drive me nuts in game audio, and it still is. I listen to a lot of games throughout the year and sit on panels reviewing games. Is, you know, the production value has improved. The cutscenes are movies. They're fantastic. They look great. They sound great, but that's fairly linear. Where it falls down still is when you get into real-time, full open real-time. You've got a character running through the world, interacting dynamically. I'm super anal. I don't know how I'm so fixated on feet and weight and a sense of character locomotion. To me, that's the first giveaway. So many games still sound like Pinocchio, I call it. So you've got these, you know, you've got all of these amazing cutscenes, and then you go into the game and you hear clickety clap, clickety click, clickety dot, 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 dot. It's just so much pattern and recognition. You got to fight hard to make it feel natural. I mean, just look at one scene of an amazing, well done movie is still, to me, more creatively, artistically, emotionally engaging than a game. Just because, you know, there's such a language and depth to putting that scene together. It's you know, it's linear, it's a bit easier, but trying to hit that level of quality and production and lack of repetition, because a movie's 2.5 hours, 3 hours these days. A game in 1 week, people can play 40 hours. So after hour number 10 and going through one level, what are you going to do different for the player that they've not heard or done before? So these are huge challenges, is swapping out content, making decisions, keeping it fresh after month 1, month 2, month 3. You know, it's crazy. It's a huge task.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have another. Oh yeah, sorry, Colin.
Oh no, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Gordon said. Pulling more from my music editorial implementation side, but kind of the same thing is that people compared to a movie, people are in games so much, and so much of my job tends to be, what can I do to make sure that people don't turn this off because it's annoying? Because, the first time it goes through, fantastic. The 50th time you hear this, sound of this piece of music, what are the things that are going to make people being like, I hate this. I played this level 10 times. I hear the sound over and over again, or I hear this piece of music over and over again. And so, definitely one of the things with player input is players are going to be hearing something over and over again. And you've got to, even if it's super cool and super awesome, it has to live up time and time again. So that's kind of something that's always on my mind is this going to be as good the first time as it is, the 30th time? Because at the end of the day, if it exhausts the player to the point where they turn off, then it's no good.
That's actually very helpful because for us as voice actors, we're also told about, when a line is repeated so many times, especially in like combat or something like that, there has to be that factor of it, like not annoying the player or anything like that. So that's really awesome to hear from your end as well. We have an anonymous question. They're asking, do you know of any free audio libraries that new sound designers can use to start practicing and creating? Any free or budget-friendly options?
I mean, sadly, you usually get kind of what you pay for a bit. There are some hidden gems out there, but the amount of work that it takes to create a compelling and really usable audio library is well worth the price. On my Discord, again, we have a freebies channel where we have members posting all kinds of plugins and libraries that they're finding that are having giveaways or free samples. We have something like 100 messages in there of each of free plugins and libraries, but off the top of my head, I don't sadly know.
For sure. No, but that, like I said, that it's a resource that's available. So that's awesome for sharing that. We have a question from Margaret, and they ask, would panelists have any advice for animation directors giving direction to sound design? Any ideal ways you find effective in communicating sound design feedback from people who are not composers or sound designers?
Yeah. So go ahead, Colin, you go.
Oh, no, I just answered. You go.
Okay. Yeah. So, it's one of those things where this is something you do a lot, whether it's games, movies, theater, whatever your medium is, as you're working with a director, producer, and visual artist, whoever it is, they're not steeped in the language of sound, so they really can talk in the abstract. So a lot of the times you're doing this sort of dance to try to understand what it is they're talking about. And you have to have, a really mature outlook on it to not be offended if they say something, off-putting about your sound design, because that's not the intent. So yeah, I generally encourage non-composers, sound designers to talk in creative ways, like describe how is it feeling? How does, they can describe, things like tone. What are you trying to get? I always ask producers and designers, level designers and creative directors, art directors, what is it you're trying to bring across in the scene, or with this character, or with this atmosphere? Like, what is the emotional intent? Like, what's the player or the viewer trying to take away from this? And then from that direction, once you can talk about what the end result is and what the emotional feel and the tone is you want to be, that gives a lot more direction from a good sound designer to work within that context. Because at that point, as Braden says, you're free to come up with anything that works. That's one of the joys of sound design. It's like there's no limits to what you can do to create the sound, as long as it serves the impact or the emotional intent of the visuals, then it's all good. So I like to work at that level of abstraction and specificity with creative directors, non-audio directors, in that they can describe what they want, but they won't be able to describe it in audio specific terms.
Colin, did you want to chime in as well?
I think Gordon answered that question pretty fully, actually.
Awesome. Well, it looks like, let's see if we have time for one more. We have one last question. This one is for Gordon. When you receive an AAF for from a client for film-based projects, how organized do you typically like to have it? Have there been any times where you remember where you've had to send an AAF back?
Oh, okay. This would be coming from either like a picture editor, I imagine. So yeah, normally you work with a sound supervisor if you're not the sound supervisor, and you're working with the editors, you're working with the editorial staff, you're working with the director and producers. So hopefully, when you're doing and you've been spotting the work, you're familiar with what's there. I like to provide people with a template as much as possible, saying, hey, when you're handing stuff over, even if you're working with another studio or you're going through different formats, here's the layout of the track. So here's the layout of the session. Here, more than anything, it's naming convention. Really, you can do the track rearranging and layouts, but if you don't know, if you're dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of files, which you can in even a modest TV show, where you've got you're integrating foley, backgrounds, hard effects, VO, all kinds of stuff, ambiances. It really does help to have a map or a path around naming conventions. Of course, file formats, just the whole technical things, like something as simple as, this is the sample rate. Please make sure everybody is at the sample rate, 24-bit, 48K, if that's what you're working on. So anything you can do up front will help. But yes, you do get rogue AAFs coming in, depending on if you're moving from one DAW or one editor to another. Things get dropped out. Fade files don't necessarily make it. Normally, professionally, it works out and you don't have to really go back and forth too much. But a couple of times, yes, I've had missing files where it's, they didn't integrate it, or something with someone when the output the AAF, they didn't select, either include all data or link appropriately. So you fire it up and your DAW is sitting there churning away. Where's this file? Where's this file? Where's this file? And you click that button 1,000 times. Yeah, at that point, it's like, please go and output the AAF again, and please include all data. So, but it's rare these days, if you're working professionally, that you get sort of a bunged up AAF.
Thank you so much for going in depth for that. And with that, it looks like we are out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much for everyone that asked questions. Thank you so much for our three guests for donating their time to be here with us. Before we go, is there any way we can keep up with you guys, follow you anywhere, starting with Colin?
Yeah. I guess I'm on Twitter, Colin and Grant. I guess that's kind of the best way. Just look up Colin Andrew Grant.
Awesome. Gordon?
Not really. I don't have much of a social media presence. LinkedIn is always a good place, so I think that's the professional zone there. But apart from that, I don't have really much of a social media presence.
Perfect. That's totally fine. Thank you so much. Braden?
Yeah, once again, I've said it a million times, but we have our Discord channel.
By all means. By all means.
YouTube channel. There you go. If you want to see us on YouTube, and there's links in there.
But yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much. And then, of course, if you guys liked this panel, we do have some more offered coming soon. So just keep up with us on social medias at the Help Network, as well as subscribing to our newsletter at helpnet.com. And of course, as always, look forward to what these guys have coming out. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and take care and stay safe. Bye, everyone.